I'm Nina Newman, Director of Admission and Financial Access at King, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to King School's first virtual coffee and conversation. This will be new for us. Usually we are in our lower school library, shaking your hands, welcoming you, getting to know your family. So this is a little odd for us, but we're hoping that it will allow you to get to know the school, get all of your questions answered, and then as we follow up with your family, we can better understand who you are and your needs and what you're looking for in a school. Today, we're going to begin with our head of school, Dr. Karen Eshu, who's going to speak to you a few minutes about King in general, sort of an overview of the school. She'll be followed by our head of lower school, Amy Vorenberg, and then our head of middle school, Dr. Josh Deitch, and finally, our head of upper school, Marnie Sadlewski. And each of them will give you an overview of their respective divisions. Then we'll quickly go to Q&A. So while Karen and Amy and Josh and Marnie are speaking, if you would like to type in a question at the bottom of your screen in Q&A, once they're each done with their overviews, we'll start addressing those questions and make sure that everything you are wondering about King School gets answered. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Karen.
All right, thanks, Nina. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you're doing well and that you're staying as safe and healthy and sane as you possibly can. We, like I think pretty much all schools, of course, are deep into our remote learning program right now. It's called King is Home, and honestly, I could not be prouder of what my faculty colleagues and all three of the division heads who are on the call today have put together. It's really been amazing. And so my job to get us started today is really to give you a few broad strokes to describe King School to you. And this is my second year as head of school here. And the reason why I wanted to come to this school in the first place, quite honestly, is because of something that was written in the job description. When I was going into a search for a new head position, I was looking at a lot of these, and most schools, when they start out to describe themselves, say things like, well, this is how long we've been in existence, and this is what our endowment is. And those things were all included in the job posting for King. But what really set it apart was that actually the first thing that King said about itself was that students love King. Students love the school. And that really spoke to me, both because of the statement itself and because that's what the authors of that document really put forward about the school. And I think it really is the essence of who we are. And so what I love about our school in particular is that our students are, first of all, amazing. They come from all sorts of different backgrounds. They come from lots of different towns in the Fairchester area. They don't all look alike or sound alike or have the same life experiences. The one thing that they all have in common is the ability to access a pretty challenging program. Our students definitely work hard and they achieve amazing things through our academic program. But what I think really sets us apart, and the reason why I'm so passionate about a King education in particular, is that we actually seek more than academic achievement for our students. And really, our goal every day is to open minds and to spark courageous thinking. Now, open minds, we believe, are really necessary for students who are going to be able to go out and change the world. And while I realize that that can sound a little Pollyanna, I actually believe that our program is designed in particular to graduate students who will do just that they're ready to go out and make the world a better place. And that's because they're open to new ideas. They are open to new ways of thinking and new ways of being. I'm seeing that certainly over last week and this week as we're doing this whole new way of learning together. And the idea of sparking courageous thinking, not being afraid to actually kind of take a step out there and take a risk, that is emblematic of the King experience. And that's actually what allows our students to go further and more deeply as a result. And that's why every day our students here at King get to discover and forge their own unique paths to excellence. And our job as the adults in this community are to teach them and to guide them and to cheer them on the entire time. The kind of support that the students at our school get no matter what their needs are, is extraordinary. And because the students are known so well by their teachers, and because they know that their teachers really care about both their academic achievement, but also their personal achievements, that means that they're much more likely to take really good risks in the classroom and try things that they may never have tried any other place before, and never be just one version of themselves. We're here to educate whole humans. We don't do the disembodied intellect thing here at King School. And so for us, what we know is that we've set this better standard really for education, because this is how we craft this. We put the student at the center always. We focus really heavily on engagement so that students are able to engage really deeply with what they're learning and find and make meaning out of it. And what that means is that their experience of education and their outcomes of education, and you can look at our outcomes just by looking at our college lists on our website, for example. What we know is that because we prioritize both, our students actually get to cultivate the insights and also the hearts that they need to own their own future, whatever that might be. It's a pretty exciting place to be. And this is a really wonderful time to be part of our school as well, just based on the successes that our students are having in so many different ways. And I know that the division heads are going to talk with you more about that too, but that's a quick snapshot of King, and why I could not be prouder than to be the head of this school, especially right now, at this time in this place. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Vorenberg, and as head of the lower school, I'm really eager to follow up on what Karen was just saying, and to talk a little bit more about why students in pre-kindergarten to grade 5 really love King. I believe that our students love coming to school because they are known and embraced and valued by their teachers. We have very strong relationships with every student in our classes, but more than just with the students in our classes, we develop strong relationships with parents and families, because we believe that strong connections build a strong school. And being part of a community that takes care of each other and works to get smarter every day, that's where children want to be. We have a balanced program. Our balanced program includes academics that stretch children to master skills and to feel really proud of their academic progress. We stretch them as artists, musicians, actors, singers, and we value the arts in the lower school. So children will represent their understanding of project-based work through their studies by building models and by using art to demonstrate their knowledge. We value children and their gross motor skills as we build an athletic program and really raise young children who love to play outside on the fields at recess, but also love to learn the rules of sports and games and come together in our gym quite often to really develop as young athletes. And we care deeply about the social and emotional skills that are necessary in a community. We problem solve together, we work through conflicts together, and we get smarter when everyone in the school classroom community really works well together. So those commitments are present every day in the lower school. We are very proud of our King is Home remote learning program right now, but I have to say, it's not the same as being together in community. And being together in community is really a magical part of King. It is seeing children in their blue uniform shirts and coming to school ready to learn and ready to be part of a smart lower school. And I miss them terribly, but we look forward to the moments that we can be back together. And I think the last thing I'll say is that it isn't only the children who love coming together at King, it's the faculty, staff. As Karen would say, the staffalty at King really loves our time together as a learning community, and that's really important.
Sorry about that. I was muted and I found out that I didn't have the ability to unmute myself. That's taken care of now. So I'm Josh Deitch. I am the head of the middle school, and I think you're going to hear a lot of themes and through lines from all of this because we're a school that really puts our relationships with our students first, and understanding of who those students are, and understands that in order for our students to have a really top-notch first-rate academic experience, those understandings of who our kids are, how they're growing, how they're learning, who they're turning into is just as important as the academics that happen within the classroom walls itself. And I think one of the things I would say that I love about our middle school and is really important to us as a middle school is that we build on the foundations that are kind of established and started in lower school. And we start to build a structure around our students in a way that lets them figure out who they are, and a way that allows them to figure out that their voices have value and meaning within a community. And I think that's so important for this age group because if you come to the school, you'll hear me say this over and over and over again, which is the idea that in these 3 years that they're with us in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the middle school, they go through more change, cognitive, physical, emotional, social, whatever type of change you can imagine. They go through more change in their lives in those 3 years than any other time in their lives, except for between when they're born and they're 3 years old. So these are the times in their lives when our students are figuring out how they relate to each other, how they relate to the world around them, and how they can kind of take the information that they're learning and use it in a more meaningful way. And like Karen said at the very beginning, I think one of the things that we care deeply about in the middle school is that we start moving from the perception of our kids as students to helping them understand that they move from student to scholar. And so often in my mind, that means that students are starting to not just understand information and take it in, but understand what you do with that information is just as important. And so they spend a lot of time in our middle school thinking about how you find information, access information, evaluate whether that information is meaningful, and then communicate it in a way that is increasingly sophisticated and clear and reflects their own growing understandings of the world around them. And I think one of the things that's so important in our middle school is that sense of community. Like Amy said, we are right now not within our school walls, and it is really hard for us as a school to think about how we continue to develop that community, because every day, I think one of the things that our students really start to believe and understand is that community is not just something that happens because the adults in their lives say, we have a strong community. It's something that happens because of the relationships they build, the interactions they have on a daily basis. And it's those moments of time where a student is celebrated for their accomplishments, whether it's on the athletic field or in a classroom or on some kind of academic competition they've just done, or simply because they took care of one another out on the recess field at that moment in time. They're celebrated for their accomplishments, not kind of looked at from a perspective of, I wish I could have been recognized. Instead, the community often is the one that comes together and recognizes all of our accomplishments together. And it's a really wonderful place to believe in that and to see that happen. And I think one of the things I would just say in our middle school more than anything else is that we have a top-notch academic program, and it's one that's flexible and flexibly designed so that our program is not designed to ask students to contort themselves to fit into that program. It's a way that we actually build a program that fits our students. And so every student has a path that they can follow. It's not necessarily going to be one that is their own specific, unique path, because it's not an a la carte educational experience, but it's a path that allows them to follow processes and take a journey towards success. And the last thing I'll say, which I think is at the heart of what we do in the middle school, is the sense that we are populated by a faculty of folks who understand that when they walk into this building, they're dealing with an incredibly unique age group where every student is trying to figure out who they are. Every student is kind of judging themselves against each other and against the adults in their lives and trying to figure out what works for them. And so, yes, we have content area experts. We have people who teach French. We have people who teach Spanish. We have people who teach math and do it really well. But the first thing we do every day is we teach kids. And even in this moment of remote learning, and in this moment where we're separated by screens and distance, the first thing we talk about almost every time we get together is how are we helping the kids and how are we teaching the kids? And it's something I'm immensely proud to be a part of. And that's the middle school.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Marnie Sedleski. I'm the head of upper school here at King, and also the associate head for program. This is my 13th year as head of upper school, and I can tell you that one of the things that has always invigorated me and inspired me about our school are exactly the thematic elements that you've been hearing from my colleagues in the lower and middle schools. And that is that we believe very much all the way across through our arc of learning, all the way to the moment when those kids walk across the stage and get their diplomas, that we see them as whole human beings. And that is certainly the theme of the upper school. We believe very strongly that for adolescents as they grow, they need to be heard, understood, and cared for, and as Josh said, seen as individuals. If you create the atmospheric conditions in which adolescents ages 14 to 18 feel that way, they feel that their teachers know them, understand them, and care for them, you can allow those kids to really fly. Our academic program is created to see each child as unique. We certainly are grounded in the liberal arts and sciences, which I'm sure all of our listeners know is really referring to learning to think like a mathematician, to see the world as a scientist sees the world, to test hypotheses, to think like a historian, looking for evidence-based reasoning and understanding the complexity of the human condition, certainly as literary scholars do, to see the world through the eyes of a visual artist, and to be able to speak multiple languages. We know mathematics is a language. We know that English is a language, French is a language. We offer Chinese. The ways of seeing the world are enriched by the skill sets that we acquire in academic program. King's academic program seeks to provide our kids with as many tools in their toolkit as possible, so that they can go out into the world, as Dr. Eshu said earlier, and really, really not only achieve their dreams, but also to succeed in making a great impact on this complex world. And I just want to talk about the complicated world just for a second. The historical moment we find ourselves in is really important for any educational community. And as Josh said, what we find ourselves in right now really shows the stuff of a community. How a community rises, an educational community in particular, rises to a challenge like this is really telling. And I have just been, really proud, but also, kind of not surprised that this is that we're doing so well in this space at King, because King is a school that always sees learning is happening all the time. And although, as Amy Vorenberg said earlier, certainly we believe that humans need to be together in the flesh, and we need to create communities of learning where we're all together. Even in those contexts, we understand that learning happens all the time. It happens synchronously when we're all in a class together studying multivariable calculus. And it also happens when we're in breakout groups or working on projects or Skyping with a research scientist at Weill Cornell to work on an advanced project through the Aspire program. Our program is flexible in the upper school, and it's designed to take students' passions and interests and flexibly shape them into pathways that inspire them and make sense for them. So we always say to our students, we're about to have course selection period coming up. No two student programs in the upper school are the same. We take those adolescent interests very seriously, and while we give them a very rigorous exposure and deepening their exposure in the upper school to those liberal arts and sciences, right? We have a rigorous core curriculum. We also understand that those skills and content goals can be mastered in a variety of contexts, and that's key for adolescents, we believe. I also want to point out that one of the things that's very, I think, unique about our approach to college counseling is the fact that, guess what? We assign college counselors in 9th grade. Our kids are all Zooming and having Google Hangout sessions right now with their college counselors, even if they're in 9th grade and they have questions about their course selection process coming up. So we believe very strongly that students need to have a team around them, and one of those team members should be a college counselor who can talk with them about their hopes and dreams and interact with them around their program choices across their 4 years at King. And rather than escalating the stress of the college process, we find that de-escalates the concerns that students have, because again, they have someone else in their camp who knows them, understands them, and cares for them, sees their strengths, sees them as whole people. The last piece I guess I would say is that King has a very strong belief that students should be able to distinguish themselves if they're able in certain ways. And so you may have learned from our website that we have a number of graduation distinctions in our upper school, again, all tied to this idea that students find themselves in many different ways, and we want to offer them as many different pathways as possible to pursue their dreams. But if there are questions out there for our audience today around those distinctions, I would be happy to address those. We have them in visual arts, STEM, leadership, a number of areas. So world languages, global education is a very big focus for us at King. So a lot of wonderful programs. We are a busy, engaged, vibrant upper school. And again, the context we find ourselves in right now highlights all of that for me. And I could not be more proud of where we are as a school, and excited to see what happens as we move through the close of the school year and start launching a new one and welcome new members of our community.
Thank you, Marnie. We have started getting some questions, which is great. I'm actually going to field the first question, which is a question about the application process while we are learning and working from home. Luckily, our application is an online application, so many of the features that we would normally require are still required and should be pretty easy for families to access. The two major hurdles we are facing is the face-to-face time that we normally would get, which benefits both the family and us, and the standardized testing, where we not all of the standardized testing that we would have used is available right now. So in order to address the first, we are doing a lot of the Zoom conversations to try to get to know you and your family and to make sure that you get all of your questions answered. We do have a virtual tour set up on our website to help you get to know the campus a little bit, and we're working on doing a second virtual tour, which will be even more enhanced than the one we have right now. So hopefully, using the magic of technology, we will still get to know each other through this process, and you'll get to know everything about King, and we'll get to know everything about you. In terms of the standardized testing, we are sort of doing them on a case-by-case basis. At this point in the year, we might be able to have more information from your schools than we would have if you were applying in December. So once we look at what your school records encompass, then we'll have a better sense of specifically what we might look at. We're looking at potentially having some younger students read to us either through Zoom, or if their parents can video it. We're looking at having some other kinds of assessments that we can send to you and have you send back to us. So depending on the age group and depending on what we can get from your current program, it'll vary a little bit how we handle the missing standardized tests. So that's that question. The next question is probably best answered by you, Karen. Mildred is wondering about the teaching environment, specifically outside of desk and chair learning. And I thought maybe you wanted to address a little bit of our research-driven program, pre-K through 12.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'd love for the division heads, obviously, to piggyback on this as well. So first of all, and you heard a number of us at least refer to this earlier in our conversation. We definitely believe that that students need to develop skills that are actually going to help them navigate the world as it is. And I think that, unfortunately, there are still a lot of schools that have kind of, tethered their students to their desks and chairs in ways that actually don't really do that. And so part of what we think is really important here, and we have, and we've really put a stake in the ground in this area in our new strategic plan, which you can find on our website, is that we believe that our students really need to learn how to ask excellent questions. Asking a good question is actually a very big challenge for not just for students, but actually for adults as well. And we are committed to teaching students how to ask good questions, because when they learn how to do that, they're able to isolate problems and challenges in ways that then allows them to start to figure out how to solve for those problems. Because we really believe that in order for our students to be successful as grown-ups, they need to be really good problem solvers. So an inquiry-based approach naturally means that students cannot just be sitting there passively at their desks and taking in information that they will then kind of just regurgitate back to their teachers. In fact, our students need to be able to learn how to do excellent research, some of which certainly is going to happen, within a building, but some of which is also going to happen outside of a building and sometimes even off campus, in order to really get to understand what true challenges are and how they might solve for them. And so, for example, when I think about how I see this happen quite literally every day when our campus is open, at least, in our lower school, is that my office actually is located in the lower school, and I have to say, I would echo what I heard Amy say earlier too, and actually I think what we're all feeling, and that is that I miss everybody deeply right now. And I think in many ways, I made some videos for our lower, our middle, and our upper school students. And for the lower school students, I told them the truth when I said that I miss them a little bit extra because we're all roommates in that same building. But when I see what I get to see the students do in the lower school all the time is, for example, the pre-K students are outside of my office literally every day. And I usually position myself at my table when I'm in meetings so I can look out my windows and see them researching. That's a program where the students' interests actually drive a lot of the curriculum. And the teachers are wonderful about teaching students how to explore and get to know and understand their own world. They can do that in the space right outside of their classrooms. Sometimes they do it by looking at nature. Sometimes they're using the blocks that we keep out there so they can learn about physics. They're doing all sorts of work like that all the time. And that's just part of their normal. And what we are working on a lot right now is taking advantage of programs like that Reggio Inspired Pre-K and those kind of fundamental truths that we know about excellent education, and weaving them very intentionally through the middle and the high school as well. And so, when I think about how learning looks for middle school students, for example, doing hands-on learning, and going back to the early 20th century when John Dewey talked about learning by doing, that has to happen for the middle school students all the time. I mean, given what Josh was just describing about middle school students and just how many changes are happening in their minds and their bodies, I mean, they're all over the place. That's actually why we love them. But what that means is that they can't just be sitting again and being passive about their learning. Instead, they have to actually get up out of their chairs and go and do it. And by the time they have developed a lot of these skills and actually know what it means to ask good questions, know what it means to research, to really be engaged in inquiry, that actually puts them in the position when they're in the upper school to do some really interesting and higher level work, depending on what their interests are. Some of those projects that students have been engaged in so far include a humanities fellowship, where students have to identify one particular research question that has some sort of global impact. Last year, the first students who actually were recipients of this fellowship, the Tom Main was my predecessor. It's named in honor of him. The Tom Main Liberal Arts Fellowship. These were students who were interested in studying the impact of nationalism on the EU. And so they went out and interviewed experts in the field. They actually traveled. They got to know what different people, whether it was a reporter for the New York Times or a member of the EU government structure, learning about it from their perspective and then drawing their own conclusions about that impact of nationalism. That's something that is well above and beyond just sitting at one's desk and asking the Google to tell you about nationalism in the EU. Same thing when our students, as they get to the upper school, get to set up some internships for themselves, especially through our Aspire program for young scientists. We have students who are working with researchers at Memorial Sloan Kettering in multiple labs, and they're doing the real work of scientists. And I think that's what I get the most excited about. When I look at the pre-K students, for example, and the way that they are doing research that's age appropriate for them, they are starting to think and work like scientists, like writers, like builders. The same way that the middle school students are learning how to think like mathematicians and like artists, and the same way that the upper school students are learning to think and work like historians and like any of the other disciplines. And again, I think this is really what sets our school apart. It's actually a lot easier to have students just do school and go through the motions. And I am much more interested in students starting to practice and feel what it's like to think and work like people who actually do this work out in the world, because that's going to position them to see themselves as empowered to make real change.
Great, thanks, Karen. Couple of quick questions I'm going to answer. There's a question about the diversity numbers in our school. About 28% of our students identify themselves as students of color. We also hang in each of our lobbies 65 international flags, which represent the countries of origin of our faculty and our students as well. And we also draw from about 30 different towns. So we really feel strongly about diversity at King. And as Karen mentioned earlier, when we're looking to enroll new students, we're really looking for kids who are going to bring different experiences and different talents to the community. The average class size is about 15 students in all 3 divisions. We really like that number. It's big enough to have a robust conversation, but small enough for the teacher to know each student individually. And there was one other quick question I was going to just answer. Oh, the high school is completely separate from the middle school, which is completely separate from the lower school in terms of buildings and in terms of most of the scheduling. There is a little bit of overlap in the Performing Arts Center. The middle school community also has lunch in the same dining room as the upper school. So there's a little bit of crossover, but one of the things we love about King is that we have the resources of a large school, but each division feels like a small school. Our largest division is our upper school with about 380 students. So even that's pretty small relative to other high schools. Josh, we have a question here about how we're handling remote learning. I don't think we need to get really in deep, but I just think some families are wondering how, what platform we're using. And could you give a quick overview on that for us?
Sure. I think one of the things I would just echo real quick before we do anything else is to recognize how I think this moment in time has kind of allowed us to continue to think about ourselves as learners and to think about who we are as teachers and what teaching and learning looks like. Because I think one of the things we can kind of get into in education is we can kind of get into ruts and things about what we expect school to look like. And over the last few weeks, every school in this country has been forced to kind of rethink what that looks like a little bit. And to be very honest, and I might be biased because I'm working here, but I thought we did a really nice job, because one of the things we recognized early on is I think we reflected exactly what our community values are. And our community values kind of remain very much at the heart of it. We're a research-driven institution. That doesn't just mean that students are doing research. It means that we follow what is out there as both the newest information and also the most responsive and relevant information to inform what we do in terms of our teaching and learning. So as we were building this program, we had the benefit of knowing that we had a few weeks to build it because we were on spring break, whereas other schools kind of had to jump in full force and figure out what it was on the fly. And so we were in conversation with those schools, thinking about what works, what was working for them, what are some of the changes they had to make along the ways. And we've been able to leverage our faculty's creativity in a way that allows us to kind of do 3 things that we believe in very wholeheartedly, both in school and out of school now, which is, the first one is balance. We've really developed a program that hopes to make sure and recognize that our students are experiencing balance in their lives. We can't control their day to the same level of, and maybe control is the wrong word, but we can't speak for their time during the day at the same level of, I guess, sureness and clarity that we would if they were in the building, right? They're at home. Every student, as Nina already spoke to, has a different family situation, a different home situation. So we recognized early on and in conversation with schools, if we were just replicating a school day and having kids be on a Zoom call from 8 to 3, we wouldn't be doing them a service. We wouldn't be providing a program that allowed them to explore and ask the questions we want them to explore, and also continue to grow and develop as human beings that we care about and know so well. And so we've kind of developed a program that kind of tilts towards a little bit more of giving work and having short, what we're calling synchronous time sessions with longer kind of exploratory work, and then opportunities to connect in more live hangout sessions, one-on-one, to both enhance the relationships that the students already have, and also to continue their own growth and learning. And of course, doing that in an age appropriate way, right? Lower schoolers, especially younger lower schoolers, aren't going as far in the asynchronous direction as maybe some of our older upper schoolers, but we're trying to kind of figure out what that balance is. The second point of the second value that we really cared deeply about was the idea of staying connected, because you've heard us talk throughout the entire time that our community matters and our community is something that's really important. And because we pull from so many different towns and communities, a lot of times our students experience community by being on campus. And so we've kind of built that through in the middle and the upper school. A lot of that community is happening in advisory sessions that happen on a daily basis. In the lower school, teachers are reaching out to families on a regular basis to make sure that everyone feels connected and welcome and open. We're also utilizing a lot of tools like screencasts, and a tool that we're really loving is a tool called Loom, which allows you to see my face as I'm casting my screen. So we've used that as a video format a lot. So we're also using Zoom and Google Hangouts both simultaneously, because they both serve different purposes and do things pretty well. But again, it's continuing those opportunities for community. So for example, last week in the middle school, we had 2 spirit days where kids were dressing up as in Decades attire, or King Spirit Day, which was part of a Spirit Week that got canceled because of our early departure before spring break. And then the last thing, of course, was probably the most important part, is the making sure that we continue student learning. And I think we made the decision early on, which was understanding that no matter how long we were going to be out for school, if we were to just review what had already been done, we weren't going to be serving our students well. And so we have been intentional about making sure that we're continuing our curriculum in a way that both serves the values I just talked about, and at the same time pushes our students in the way that we want them to continue to strive and grow and stretch. And so for every student, that looks a little different. And I think one of the things that's been empowering for us, even in the midst of all this anxiety and new, has been the expectation that we're learning how to do things differently that actually supports our students and supports our community values and our school's values in even new and different ways than we had been kind of had to in the past. So sometimes those moments of disruption are actual moments for even greater change and greater growth. And I think our faculty has been really seeing that and seeing all of these tools that are out there, whether it's Flipgrid, which is a video call and response tool, whether it's Padlet, which allows it to be kind of a community aggregator, whether it's our learning management system, which has been utilized to the nth degree over the last few weeks. We're kind of finding all the tips and tricks that we can kind of figure out. And again, what works for one class and one student is not going to work necessarily specifically well for another class and another student. So we're making sure that students and teachers have the flexibility to engage in that learning at the right pace and the right system and on the right platform that works for them. That wasn't that brief. Sorry, Nina.
Great. It was thorough, though. Marnie, could you briefly describe a typical day in the upper school? I think we're not talking remote learning here. We're talking about what it would look like today if our kids were filling the hallways in the classrooms.
Absolutely. So on a typical day, kids start joining us in the upper school around 7:45 at drop off. They mill around, they get snacks, they go to their lockers, they talk to each other, and they land at 8 o'clock in an advisory, which they visit every single day at that time. That's a regular rhythm for them. They hang out with their advisory groups and with their advisor, who is their main point of contact and their parents' main point of contact throughout the school year. And they talk about some goals that they may have set. They review their calendars and they go off to their first commitment. Because we have an 8-day rotating schedule currently in the upper school. Some periods meet longer than others, but kids do not meet every single class every single day. Their first commitment may actually be to a club. Their first commitment might be to a lab in a science room, or maybe a traditional, what we would think of as a more traditional seminar style course in history. So they go to their first period block, whatever that is for them. And interestingly, the rhythm of the school day is set up, I think it's interesting. We're a little nerdy about how we use time and space and think about it in terms of enhancing student learning. So I think it's very interesting. We have a great schedule where we have 2 courses followed by a gray block, which is a club's period or an assembly period, or what we call a King Talk, like a TED Talk, right? But the kids and teachers do special talks that are inspiring for us, definitely. And then 2 periods, and then there's lunch. And then 2 periods, and then there's home, sports, clubs, theater practice, any activity that the kids are participating in. So we believe very strongly in the upper school that adolescents need to have cognitive breaks during the day. And although 9th graders and first semester 10th graders are assigned to study halls, there are still times in the day, that's why I mentioned those gray blocks, where they can take cognitive breaks and they don't have, so that you're not looking at a schedule where a high school kid is going from, a French class to calculus, to a really serious Harkness style discussion in a philosophy class without cognitive breaks. We know that the adolescent brain needs to have time for reflection and practice. And so, a typical day for kids is going to include a mix of heavy cognitive load, some breaks, opportunities to, again, see this holistic learning taking place in clubs, King Talks, class meetings, all the rich ways that adolescents need to experience themselves as learners. And, so the school day follows that kind of pattern: advisory, course, break, course, lunch, course, activity, home, practice, whatever it may be.
Thanks. And our final question I'm going to ask Amy to answer. And this is a great question to sort of sum up King, probably. I think each of you mentioned how much we get to know our students as individuals, and how much, to a certain extent, we can customize our program. But as Josh mentioned, it's not an a la carte education. It definitely is a comprehensive educational program. So could you give an example, maybe a 4th or 5th grader example of how we get to know the kid as an individual and help them become the best version of themselves, without having them being tutored specifically by one teacher, in our community of learners, what that nuance is like?
Sure. I think as we get to know children and get to understand what their passions and interests are, there's all sorts of ways that we can tailor their learning to stretch them in those areas. Right now, even though we are in a remote learning situation, we're getting ready for the science fair. And the 5th graders in the science fair will all be working on research questions and developing their science projects based on their interests. And so they're coming up with questions that they will use as they pursue the scientific process to basically, build a hypothesis, test it. But the range of explorations will be wide, and those will be things that children are really interested in exploring. I will add just very quickly, when we did our global studies project across all of the lower school classrooms in early March, individual students were able to pick areas of interest. So some students did research on the animals of the rainforest in Brazil, others did research on weaving and the arts. And we were able to then help children express their understandings based on those interests. And I think as they move up through the grades, and certainly by the time they get to high school and they're building out a schedule that includes the integration of the courses that are most compelling to them within the requirements of the program, it allows us to really lean into stretching students with their passions and interests, while also knowing that there are core requirements and academic skills that they need to also master and accomplish.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. This is not your last opportunity to ask questions. Please reach out. We are getting our voicemails and we're getting our emails, and we will contact you. We'd love to answer your specific questions and tell you more about why we're so proud of our school. And thank you to our awesome panelists. I really appreciate your time this morning. Take care.
You.
Thank you.